We have the first of two storm systems that will be impacting the Northeast over the next 5 days, and a bunch of winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings are up, and they'll probably be up also for the second weather system along about Wednesday. We're going to talk about that, the long range, and much more today on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. In southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, they've got mulch, they've got salt, they've got sand, and they have snow blowers, shovels, spreaders, everything you need to get you through the winter should the coastal areas ever see any kind of snow, which I think we actually might on Wednesday. Maybe a little bit tomorrow, but we might on Wednesday. And you can head over to Omni, 6317561125 for the best prices anywhere. The website is omnitruevalue.com. I know I stole your line there.
Yeah, I noticed.
I'm sorry.
omnitruevalue.com.
Yes. So, good morning to you. Good morning to everybody watching this morning on the chat board and lurking about in the background. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show on our Sunday morning show. I've got my OJ this morning, Joe. Nice glass of orange juice. I dilute it with about 60 to 70% water because the juice is, I don't know, just I find it too sweet, too overpowering. But no matter.
Watch out. What type? Because I heard that one orange juice on the market is being recalled because it has poisonous chemicals in it. Or
oh, that's
did you hear about that?
I bought this orange juice No, I haven't. I bought this a few weeks ago. I think it's Tropicana.
Good. Okay, that's not the one that has a problem, so to speak.
Okay, good. So, well, that's good to hear since I'm ingesting the stuff even as we speak. Anyhow, we have two storms here, two storm systems. I kind of thought that some areas tomorrow inland, maybe even on the coast, might see a change to sleet and snow before it ends. Some of the models are showing that. But I was also looking at some of the soundings, and they're not particularly cold at the bottom of the atmosphere. It's one of these things where it gets down to like 33, 34, depending on intensity. So I'm not really thinking that there's going to be too much out of that. The only exception to that might be, I thought maybe around the Boston area, maybe northernmost Connecticut and Massachusetts, might wind up with a few inches or more, just like they did the other day when waiting for the upper trough to kind of swing around. But I think Wednesday, Joe, I think we have a legitimate shot. There's enough cold air, I think, that drains down Tuesday night that there might be a front end
thump.
Yeah, when I thump might be a little bit too strong a word, but I certainly could see where we wind up with measurable snowfall in places that haven't seen it, and that it could be on the order of a coating to a few inches before it goes over to rain.
In the midst of what has been happening in my life over the last couple of days, I've been especially interested in the weather for Tuesday, because that's when the interment for my mom will be at the St. Raymond Cemetery in the Bronx. And so, of course, what I'd like to have, and I know a lot of you out there who are snow lovers and winter weather lovers and have been saying, where's the frigid cold and where's the snow? And we really want that. And, the last thing you would want in a situation that I'm going to be facing on Tuesday is just that, frigid cold and snow. So it looks like Tuesday is going to be a relatively nice day. I have been looking at the maps, in my spare time, and I'm not doing other things that are relative to what's going to be happening in the next couple of days for me. One thing I've noticed, Joe, about the FOOS, the North American model, regarding what's going to happen here tonight into tomorrow morning, is the fact that the FOOS has been vacillating back and forth in terms of temperatures. The 12Z run of the FOOS the last couple of days have been indicating T1s at LaGuardia, the boundary level temperatures at the lowest level, the first 50 or 60 millibars. It has been indicating that the low levels will be quite warm, on the order of 4 or even 5 degrees Celsius.
Right.
But meanwhile, the overnight runs, the 0Z runs, have been bringing that T1 temperature down to something like 3 or even 2 degrees.
I saw that.
Yeah. Well, the latest one right now has teeth. As I was calling it up, I was saying, now you watch, it's going to jump back up to 4 or 5. And sure enough, it has done that. So it's been going back and forth, struggling with trying to determine. But even with the +2 value, that would seem to indicate that it would be big wet flakes coming down and not really accumulating to any degree. If it's +4 or 5, forget it. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So it looks like if there is going to be any snow with this upcoming system, it will be areas north and west, even maybe just to the north of where I am, north of 84. Wednesday, I agree with you. Wednesday could be a bit different because this system that'll be passing on by will be pulling down a bit more in the way of colder air. And as a result, on Wednesday, there may be just enough cold air, a modest amount of cold air, to allow the initial shot of precipitation on Wednesday to be snow, even down. Let me put it another way. Wednesday, and that system will begin affecting the New York area probably around midday, late morning or early afternoon. But initially, there may be just enough to put down maybe a few tenths of an inch, even at Central Park, and that would put an end to the so-called snow drought of no measurable snow that's going to run on for over 300 days. That may happen on Wednesday. It's more likely to happen on Wednesday than let's say later today or tonight.
Yeah, some of the modelings are even putting down an inch or two. Down right near the coast, which I don't think it's impossible. This first low, we talked about how last week how important this first low was going to be with regards to the second one, and a couple of things have changed because we had models that were showing a really wrapped up low going into the eastern legs, which of course you could have thrown the idea of even a front end thump out because you would have had screaming south winds up the coast. But as we've progressed from what was being shown in the middle part of last week till now, we're seeing a much flatter looking system that is coming out of from the southern plains and the southwest, and you wind up with basically a primary that goes to northern Ohio and dies out, and a redevelopment probably right around off the central Jersey coast or just south of Long Island. So it opened the door up to some colder air. Plus, we've got a little bit of a, with this upper trough tomorrow, there's a little front that's coming through tomorrow evening or tomorrow night, and that's got that little, as you described it, pulling down cold air or just enough cold air, and that sort of changed the profile for Wednesday. Maybe we'll get for snow lovers get a little energy as the warm front kind of starts to push upward. Sometimes you can get more than just a couple of inches out of it, but for now I would think it's probably safe to say that most places could wind up with a quick coating to maybe a few inches before it ultimately gets washed away and goes to rain anyhow.
I agree, and we'll see. It's not going to be anything that's going to paralyze this area. I've been looking back also in recent days about all of the storms that have occurred during the first 20 days of January. Of course, the first of the two big ones back in 1978, and of course the blizzard of '96. And through all of this, I keep looking out the window and seeing my lawn. Not just parts of my lawn, but my lawn. I mean, there's nothing out there. And as I think I mentioned a while back, I think personally the record for all the time that Renato and I have been up here in Putnam Valley, this is the 21st winter that we're up here. I think the longest we've ever gone without having to use the snowblower, Valentine's Day 2007, when we had like 3 inches of sleet and snow. Otherwise, we haven't needed. So it'll be interesting to see if we can get through these next few weeks without having to use the machine. Certainly, it's in a way it's a blessing. But I know a lot of you snow lovers have been sitting there and almost disconsolate, saying, where is it? Where's the cold? Where's the snow? Whatever like that. I have a feeling that you will get your wish. Maybe not necessarily in the end of January or even during February, but I just have a feeling that maybe now we're moving toward a big surprise in March.
Yeah,
that might very well be the case.
Pretty soon the clock is going to start to tick. For me, the clock starts ticking right around the first week of February, where I start to think in terms of the fact that, well, there's probably only a good 6 weeks left until uh, we get to a point where it would have to be perfect for something to happen, and that's usually around St. Patrick's Day from there on.
Right.
So yeah, obviously the first part of this winter has been a big disappointment. On the other hand, and I want to be fair to those that don't want any of this stuff and they don't want to deal with the cold, this has been a great winter for your pocketbook. You're paying far less for heating oil and natural gas to heat your homes. There have been days where you could actually have shut the heat off, or at least, it wasn't running for a while. You don't have to pay for snow removal, and if you're not paying for it and do it yourselves, you don't have to exert the energy and devote that energy to something else. And you don't have any travel headaches. You don't have any driving headaches. So
Right.
there are pluses to all of this. And David Schwartz, I don't think by Thursday morning you probably should be okay with that Wednesday system. By that time, it's probably going to be I think it's probably going to be mostly done by then. So on that note, why don't we start with les watches and les warnings that are up, and we've got um, a number of winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up for the interior Northeast. I don't think that's any surprise. I'm using the big map today to show you winter storm warnings for much of coastal Maine, southern Massachusetts, and southern half of New Hampshire, southernmost Vermont, a good chunk of the northern counties in Massachusetts, advisories surrounding that area down to the Connecticut state line. We have winter weather advisories up for the areas north of I-90, moving up into northeastern New York, and winter storm warnings for the Catskills and just south of the Albany area here, and advisories in northeast and north central PA, down the Appalachians, all the way into western North Carolina, where the issue is probably going to be more some freezing precipitation there. Also, we've got warnings up in Northeast Ohio. We've got winter storm warnings. Advisories up for Northeast Ohio. Winter storm warnings up for parts of Southwest Ohio, Southeast Indiana, and a small portion of northern Kentucky. I think that's in and around Louisville, Joe. Louisville. And
Louisville? Are you
yeah,
sure not Louisville?
no, it's Louisville, of course. And out in the west, we have.
Here's the question, Joe. Here's a question that has boggled many. What is the correct pronunciation of
Louisville,
the capital of Kentucky?
Frankfurt.
Frankfurt. You heard that joke before.
Yes,
yeah.
Frankfurter.
It's Frankfurter. Yes.
Yes. In the southwest, we've got wind advisories, high wind warnings in central and southern California. We've got winter weather advisories in parts of Utah and Arizona and southeast Colorado. We'll go up north to see what's going on there. And we have various winter weather advisories. I'm jumping the gun here. Winter weather advisories up through parts of Utah. Idaho. Oh boy. And northern Montana, and dense fog advisories, Joe. Everybody's favorite advisory, I think, is the dense fog advisory. Bunch of counties in central North Dakota, eastern parts of South Dakota, southwestern Minnesota, northwestern Iowa, and a handful of counties in northeast Nebraska. So that pretty much kind of takes care of the watches and warnings. And we're looking at the satellite. A lot of clouds. Yesterday there were a lot of clouds in the northeast. It didn't really clear out very much. And then now, of course, we're seeing the rush of clouds coming in ahead of the precipitation that is on its way. I also thought, by the way, that maybe as it arrives, it wouldn't shock me if some areas just inland see a couple of flakes or maybe a couple of ice pellets when the precip comes in. That happened one day last week, so I suppose that could happen again. But you see there's a lot of moisture here moving into the east, and you're starting to see the energy in the west that's going to make the next storm on Wednesday.
Right. I'm just looking here, Joe, as you're talking at the tweets that have been put out. by Big Joe Bastardi, who says that a monster 10 millibar, and we'll look at this probably before the show is over, monster 10 millibar Stratworm getting ready to start. And he says, look at this reversal from now to early February. And somebody else, I don't know, I'm not acquainted with the name, Mark Margage, saying GFS, HRRR, and RAP snowfall totals. Southeast trend evident from 12Z to 18Z. Well, this is from yesterday.
Yeah.
There's going to be a sharp line between great snowman snow and a cold rain. Precipitation rates can make all the difference with what we are looking at for the next few days. Marginal temperature. We just said that it's going to be marginally cold,
Right.
and depending on where you are, that's where you're going to get the snow. You can't really work too much with it.
You can get a fairly solid snowfall with marginal cold air if you have intensity. If you know, we've seen it with some developing lows that pull in cold air, where it's marginal cold air. Maybe the temperature gets down to 32 or 33 or 31, but it's accompanied by moderate to heavy snow, and that offsets, because the minute the snow lightens up, those temperatures start to inch up to 34, 35. You don't have a real solid push of cold air, of quality cold air, as the low goes by. So that makes it problematic unless you're far enough inland with the first one. And as we said, with the second one, there might be a little bit more to work with ahead of it. So, and we'll get to that, of course, in a minute. In the meantime, on the radar, a lot of precip here. Oops, hang on. Let me go to the east. A lot of precip here in North Carolina. Some heavy rains into southeastern Virginia. We also have precip moving across Ohio into western PA with some heavy precip down in southern Ohio. There are actually some showers and thunderstorms in southeast Georgia and on the Florida Panhandle, which is why the Storm Prediction Center has a marginal risk of severe weather there. And that also comes, by the way, with a 2% tornado risk. There's nothing going on for tomorrow other than some general thunderstorms in South Florida, across Texas, and back over into New Mexico and Arizona. But we should point out with that next developing low that SPC has a slight risk of severe weather. This is Tuesday into Wednesday. Southeast Louisiana, southern Alabama, and southern Mississippi, with the marginal risk wrapped around it. Not a shocker, really. There's a pretty decent shortwave trough that's going to be moving to the east with this. Did you think everybody was commenting, by the way, on I'm sorry, like the days are piling up on my head, and I haven't kind of lost track. When was it? With the last weather system, was it Thursday night, Joe, or Friday? Or it was Thursday night. There were thunderstorms all. Yeah, it was Thursday night. There were
It was Thursday.
There were thunderstorms all over the place that moved on through during Thursday night. I don't know if you got any, but I know a lot of people.
We did.
You did? Yeah, a lot of people report
did.
on that.
Yeah, we had just gotten home from the Bronx, and with very heavy. It was a horrible day to just simply commute on Thursday. Rain, and I had not looked at any maps, and I was figuring that going home Thursday evening, everything was going to peter out, but instead we only ran into even more rain, heavy. And when we got home, and I flopped on the couch, and I looked out the window, and all of a sudden I said, I think I just saw lightning. And then like 2 or 3 seconds later, right. So
you heard a kaboom.
Yes.
Where's the kaboom?
Yeah, we got the kaboom.
The kaboom. All right, let's take a look at what WPC has to say, because we're always interested in what WPC has to say. And we'll start with the 7-day liquid precip map in this busy pattern. So this covers both storms, by the way, and you're seeing a fairly large area of 1.5 to 2.5 and even some 3-inch liquid amounts in southeast New England. And that area runs from coastal Maine all the way down into South Georgia. We have another max area in southwest Louisiana and southeast Texas. And but a lot of the Ohio Valley and the Northeast down through the Southeast and the Deep South, showing at least 3/4 of an inch to an inch of rain in most places. And while all that's going on, we continue to see a relaxation, particularly on the West Coast, where precipitation is going to be minimal over the next 7 days. Up and down the California coast, most of it is under a tenth of an inch, a little bit more up in the Pacific Northwest, but not much. We're talking about maybe 1/4 of an inch in some places, and in some of the mountains of the northern Rockies, picking up an inch plus in liquid. Now let's do the snow maps. So I made sure I had the latest ones. So this was from 9:14 this morning. There's the probability of at least 2. So this takes us to Wednesday morning. So what you're seeing in the Northeast is and in Ohio, that's a clean number. It doesn't include the second system. So we're looking at 80 to 100% probability of at least 2 across northern Pennsylvania. Looks like the middle and upper Hudson Valley in that 80% area. Much of the western half of Massachusetts, at least 50% in southeast New Hampshire, and then 80 to 100% going north and extending up into Maine. If we look at the probability of at least 4, that is covering areas from the Catskills up through central New York and maybe kind of sneaking up there in the Adirondacks with a 50% probability of at least 4. Also in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, at least a 50% probability, and that extends into the northwestern third of Massachusetts. It should be noted that there's not much showing up. We're talking about a 5% chance down into northwest New Jersey, and on the 2% map, just north of 84, Joe, is where the 50% for at least 2. And I think for those areas, it's probably more on the back end than on the front end.
Right. Well, yeah, because the colder air will be flowing in more freely on the back end as opposed to on the front end. Now, you told me that before the show that I have sharing capabilities, and what I'd like to do. A couple of people have been on the chat board have said, well, what about comparing the Wednesday system with what happened in November of 2018? So let me just show all of you as a comparison. First, we'll look at November 15th, 2018. That's the one that caught everybody by surprise. New York City got a quick 6 inches out of that, and all kinds of mayhem. I think you can see on your screen, this is from that day, Thursday, November 15th, 2018. Had a storm system. Primary low was in southern Indiana, lateraling its energy to a new system developing off of the South Carolina coast. But more importantly than the 2 disturbances that I'm showing you here, this was the main player. This was a cold dome that had settled in over the Northeast in what really is the perfect position for cold high pressure. This was a 1039 high pressure system centered over northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire. That if you want to make a snowstorm, regardless of what month it is, November, January, even April, you want to have something like this in your camp. This is going to supply the cold air. As of 7 a.m. that morning, you see where the 32-degree, the freezing line was. And here's a system that's slowly but surely developing, the second system off of the Carolinas. Now let's take a look at the next day. The next day, the storm was already occluding to maturity. It was sitting literally right over the metro New York area, but we got a good hard time. And notice also that the 32-degree line was still just barely over the New York area, but still just enough so that much of what fell in the form of snow was heavy consistency, wet snow, but did accumulate to about a half a foot, about 5 or 6 inches in many localities. So that's what happened and the big high has moved on out now off to the north and east, but was able to drop or leave in its wake just enough cold air for the low to work with. That's the secondary system. I presume this was the primary, moving up into the western lakes and dying out. But the new system, the one off the Carolinas, moved all the way up along the coast and gave us a pretty good snowfall. So that was in 2018. Now, let's take a look at what's expected for this upcoming system. And this would be for Wednesday. And let me share the screen here. Now, what you have is you don't have a system. First of all, you don't have on this map a coastal system. You would like to have a system, a secondary along the coast, because the secondary will usually serve to cut off any warm air advection coming in from off the ocean. Based upon this particular map, which was done by one of the WPC forecasters, and this is for Wednesday morning now, you have the primary system still quite strong over Tennessee, over the Tennessee Valley. Do you have a big high like we did in 2018? Well, we do have a high, and it is in a not too bad position over southern Quebec, but it's not 1039, it's 1028, and the cold air associated with it is there, but it's marginally cold. It's not really the cold air that we had to work with in 2018 ahead of the system. And now we take a look at the next day, which would be Thursday. And, well, there you go. I mean, there's a massive, very strong system. And that's going to be the problem, I think, for all of you snow lovers, is that this is going to be, number one, a very strong, too strong type of system. And if there's a secondary, and it probably will develop a secondary on the occluded triple point, but it's probably going to be too late to keep any of the snow locked in. And the high pressure system has moved on out away to the north and east. So, yeah, it looks like, as Joe mentioned at the start of the show, it looks like this could very well begin as snow, even in the New York metropolitan area. But if you're going to think about holding on to that snow and maybe putting down 3, 4, 5, Lord, only 6 inches like we did in 2018, that really does not look like it's going to happen. It may put down a measurable snow, but initially, but again, it looks like there's going to be just too much of this storm in terms of warm air advection to set the stage for that. More likely, a little bit of snow and then a heck of a lot of rain coming in later on Wednesday night, and on into Thursday as well.
It makes a lot of sense. We just, if we had a little bit more, if the southeast ridge were a little bit flatter, we could be having a totally different conversation and be more bullish with regards to snowfall. Just want to acknowledge Leon Probitsky hitting super chat this morning. Thank you, Leon. David Schwartz hit super chat. Thank you, David. Once I'm back in New York City on the 30th, he says it could snow all at once. And we had a quick guest appearance from the chairman, Scott Briller. Still dealing with issues with himself and his mom, but he popped in to say hello and to express condolences about your mom, Joe. And he says, "I shall return."
Is that a promise or a threat?
No, it's a promise. I'm sure it's a promise.
Yeah.
So let's go back to WPC. Hang on, let me just.
We have one gentleman on the chat board.
Just one?
No. One gentleman who is speaking and is
in tongues,
posting in Spanish. And I have had a chance. I took his message all in Spanish and have translated into English. And he's writing also in hurricanes. There are 21 strong hurricanes in the Atlantic area, and it is also going to rain a lot. Paranoid, Jalisco for the weekend there will be a lot of wind of 50 miles per hour. Well, these translators on Google are not the best, but I think he's talking about what's going on down in the tropics. At least that's what I'm gleaning here.
You mean for the upcoming hurricane season?
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't seen his initial. Oh, wait a minute. He did have an initial Spanish. And again, I'm just trying to do this so that I can get an idea of what specifically he's trying to the idea he's trying to pass along here. Again, in Spanish, he said, But I don't understand this. This is said to be a police station for the hurricane season 2023 of 23 this year, 2023 of this year, 2023 in the Atlantic. No, it doesn't seem to make any sense. I
It
appreciate your
sounds like
trying to join the chat.
it sounds like he's doing numerology.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we appreciate you tuning in and watching us, even though we don't understand the point you're trying to get across. Anyway.
Yes.
All right.
All right. So back to WPC. We do have some snow, high probabilities of 50% for at least 2 in northwestern Arkansas, southern Missouri, and eastern Oklahoma. Also in northwest Texas, Amarillo, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, 50% or higher going into New Mexico. And then you see patches scattered up and down the Rockies. But hey, for the first time in a long time, we don't have a stripe going down the Sierra Nevadas in California. So
yeah,
if there's if that's not proof that the pattern has changed, I don't know what is.
I tell you, it's for the day after day after day. They could use a break, and yeah, they finally. And this was not a surprise. They have been calling for drier conditions, a chance to dry out over the West for the last week or two, and it indeed is finally coming to fruition.
So WPC, now this is the long range. I jumped to Wednesday, and we are seeing a lot of blue and even some light blue showing up. We haven't seen much of this in quite a while, but they've got 10 to 30. I'm okay with this map. Okay, I'm okay with this map. So this is the probability for a snow and sleet equivalent of 1/4 of an inch of liquid. To me, that's just like, okay, the easiest way to look at it is to say that this is the probability of at least a few inches, okay? And a few being 2 or 3, okay? So the dark green is 30 to 50%, and I think for the first time in a long time, we actually have it into the northwestern counties of New Jersey in the Hudson Valley, let's say from Dutchess County northward, but you're not too far away. Orange County would be. That extends across into parts of, let's call it westernmost south central Pennsylvania into western Maryland and into eastern West Virginia, northwestern Virginia. Also seeing 50% or higher, 50 to 70% probability of at least a few inches in the Catskills. 70 to 90% in the Adirondacks, 50 to 70 in Vermont, Western Mass, New Hampshire, Western Maine, 30 to 50 going east from there. So it's a pretty bullish view here from WPC for Thursday. And then, of course, for Wednesday, I'm sorry, and then for Thursday into Friday, it just shifts up into northern New England as the storm pulls away. I just want to back up a little bit here for Wednesday into Thursday, just to see what they have anywhere else going on. And no, we're all by ourselves, Joe, for a change. We're all by ourselves here in the eastern part of the U.S. They sometimes update this around 10 in the morning, except on Sundays, apparently, because every time I try to do this on a Sunday morning, Joe, there's never a new forecast in here.
Right.
So, anyway, so this was based on guidance. This was not based on last night's European. They probably only got a sneak peek of the GFS before they came out with this. So just to put it in perspective, when it comes to the timing of the long range, these forecasts are usually at least a half a model cycle behind. So anyway, on that note, let's go to the upper air. Now, I went back to Saturday, and I did this for a reason. Because when I was looking at Saturday's run of the GFS, I thought, you know what? This may not be too bad a pattern, because as we noted, the fire hose is gone, but we did not change into we changed into another semi-unfavorable pattern, and I say semi-unfavorable because I think that the new pattern that's emerging right now, at least for a while, is not terrible for snow lovers, and it's not terrible for the snow haters because it produces it could potentially produce some chances for snow, but nothing that gets out of hand. And on the other hand, it also, while it might bring temperatures back to normal for this time of year, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get exceptionally cold. So on that note, I think I've either got both sides angry or made both sides happy So anyhow, just to take you through, so now we're looking at uh, here we are today, and you see this trough that's moving through. It's a nice little short wave. It's progressive. It moves out. It's not a wrapped up upper low like you have in the Southwest. This is for Monday morning. So now this goes by. Now you see there's a rotation there in over Hudson Bay. So there's this upper trough that is swinging through eastern Canada. That brings in that little bit of cold air that sets up maybe for a front end snow on Wednesday. The trough axis is still too far to the west, so the energy lifts up to our left, in more toward the Great Lakes than anything else. It's not a wrapped up upper low major storm in the lakes like was being shown back in the middle part of last week. And then we get into this pattern, Joe, that, as I said, it's not perfect. The trough kind of want to drop. It drops down from western Hudson's Bay into the southwestern part of the U.S., but there is some cold here. There is some cold air connecting, coming down out of Canada and into the east. And the one thing I thought of was that if the pattern were to stay flat enough, in other words, you don't get some monstrous trough in the west that digs all the way down into Mexico, which would force the region off the east coast to go all the way up. But if it could stay flat, we could get a situation where you get cold air that spreads out across southern and eastern Canada. We're kind of on the edge of that. The cold air kind of sort of drains southward down into the mid-Atlantic states. And then you have like an overrunning boundary in this west-southwest flow. And if you get these little kinks that come out, these little these weak perturbations that come out, that maybe you could set up for some kind of an overrunning type pattern in the longer term, rather than having deep lows or deepening lows that turn up. You just sort of have a frontal boundary with maybe flattish waves. I thought that was maybe a good possibility of happening as we move through late next week and then get beyond the end of January and going into the beginning of February. It's not a let's call it an ideal winter snow pattern, but it's not a terrible fire hose Pacific jet either.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, hey, look, beggars can't be choosers. I mean, we can't ask for the absolute perfect transition to very cold and wintry conditions, but it's certainly what we're looking at now in the coming days and weeks is certainly a lot better than what we have seen since the Christmas freeze back in late December. So there is hope. There is some
Yeah.
hope.
Now I'm looking at the new GFS, which actually has a similar look to the one from yesterday, except that the trough has shifted a little bit more slightly more to the west, and maybe a little bit more ridging in the east. So that could be problematic. But let's see. In some ways, more than others, we do have a little bit of a negative East Pacific oscillation later this week and into the weekend, but that may go away if we get more troughing to be a little bit further west than indicated. But here's a case where you've got kind of a west-southwest flow. I'm out to day 10 now. You got this sort of west-southwest flow with this trough with an upper low from Hudson Bay and a trough axis that goes all the way down to San Diego. So what you kind of have to hope for is that you get enough cold air and you get an overrunning boundary that sets up just to the south, and something winds up happening with that. So let's see what kind of a picture it draws on the surface here. And let's roll back. And by the way, the one other thing I would notice is that the GFS has been trying to be over amplified a lot. So in fact, a lot of the models have been showing it where they're over amplified in the long range and things come out looking much flatter. So just bear that in mind. I wouldn't necessarily, as always, you never should take the models too literally from run to run after you get beyond the fifth or sixth day. But here's the first storm system, and you see the low. Yeah, it's too bad, Joe. With a little bit more cold air, with the way this low is tracking, we probably could have done fairly well for snow, for snow anyway. But that goes out, and again, I would just watch areas in Connecticut and Massachusetts tomorrow for a change over to snow, particularly northern Connecticut and Mass and northern Rhode Island maybe. Get this upper trough to swing on through like it happened the other day. Then it goes out. You can see there's a weak front here tomorrow. This is Tuesday afternoon. There's this weak front right in there. Your quality cold air is more up here. And, here's your next low, 1,002 low there near Austin in Texas. And then it goes into northern Louisiana. You see the snow in Oklahoma and Arkansas. And then the low goes into northern Mississippi. So I could see why they have severe weather risk the way they do for later Tuesday and Tuesday night. Nice little high, but not enough of one, but just enough that we get a little bit of cold air in there for something on the front end. And there's your low. So, I mean, if you were in southeast Missouri, southern Illinois, northwest Indiana, into Michigan, you probably could do pretty well with this snow-wise. Also, again, up into central and northern New England. The low goes out. We turn colder behind it. Actually, I think this is for the first time in a while, get under 522. We haven't seen that in a long time. Arctic, another little polar front that comes through on Saturday. Not much with that. And then you start to see that cold. There's the high there in the northwest. Suddenly there's a coldish high. This is Monday, January 30th. And you see where the overrunning tries to set up here, but you can also see that it's kind of pointing the finger toward the western New York. With some kind of wave going up that way. It's flatter than the prior run. That if you want to get a takeaway from that, but here's what I'm getting at. Here's right in here. This is like at day 10 or 11. This is all cold air that's kind of spread out. So again, if everything could be flattened up in the upper flow, Joe, maybe we'll get some chances going forward in the first couple of weeks of February with this emerging pattern.
And also, I'm looking at the NAM here. This is out through 84 hours, of course, and looking ahead at the Wednesday situation. The 32-degree line, the freeze line on the NAM 12 kilometer, is right over New York City at 15Z at 10 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. And by the time the precipitation begins or is arriving, it has moved up into northern sections of Westchester. And then it actually drops back toward the New York metropolitan area by 21Z by 4 o'clock. So if you take this at face value, the 32-degree line is going to be wobbling across the tri-state area, which can only infer that for places like New York City and maybe lower Westchester and Long Island, you may find yourself with a kind of a mixed bag of wet snow and sleet. But further inland, on up toward northern Westchester, where I happen to be, and points north of there, it still stays at or even below 30 degrees right on through 0Z Thursday. So that would imply, at least at the moment, that there could be a rather significant snowfall not too far away from New York City later Wednesday and Wednesday night. I might add also, and I think I may have mentioned this, in 1973, January 29, 1973, the year when we went as far as almost the end of January before measurable snow was falling at Central Park, which still stands as a record today, January 29th, New York City picked up 1.6 inches, but just north and west, there was like a foot of snow over the Hudson Valley. I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen on Wednesday or Wednesday evening this week, but it seems to suggest that while New York City may still be waiting for, a snow that can be shoveled, areas not too far away to the north and west, I may have to take a look at my snowblower and get ready, because this certainly looks like it may very well be when I finally break out the snowblower this season on Wednesday late or Wednesday evening. We'll see.
I brought up that NAM 2-meter temperature, and there's the 32 is the dashed purple line. I just kind of drew a line there toward New York City, and then I tried to kind of follow it here, and then with my finger, and that didn't work. So doing it with the little pencil. So there's the 32-degree line, and that also extends down into northwestern Virginia and gets pinched off there and then comes back up. So, you kind of can see where the low is just looking at the way the isotherms are. Your low is somewhere in western Ohio on this, and you got what looks like a hairpin warm front with that. It's going to be cold. I mean, you got temperatures in the teens to near 20 from Albany north. Wednesday evening. So it sort of makes sense, and that's probably why when we look at the precip, the way the NAM generated the precip, and we don't know if this is exactly correct, but it's got snow Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Over all of Long Island is in snow. There's this big empty spot in New Jersey and Southeast PA that doesn't show anything, but uh, at least on the period before, and it comes in around 1 o'clock in the afternoon and covers Pennsylvania, Northwest New Jersey, Long Island just sort of getting into it, the Hudson Valley, and then you start to see it expand a bit. Yeah, you know what? This is all we have to, this is what we have to work with. and you just kind of make it work. You try to make it work.
Just keep it in the back of your mind, though, that the NAM, especially long range, like beyond, let's say, 48 or 60 hours.
Highly suspect.
Well, not highly suspect so much that it tends to be in such situations the coldest of the models. So you have to you look at this, you say, wow, look at this, we got, but you really have to take into account also the other models, the GFS, even the Canadian model, and see what they're saying as well. I'm not saying that it's going to be a shutout. I'm not going to say again it's going to be a major snowfall or even a modest snow. We just have to wait and get just a little bit closer. But if you want a cheap thrill, as Joe often says, this might be your thrill for this upcoming week and so far for this winter.
Well, you mentioned the Canadian. So the Canadian is showing the rule that I always fall back on, and it's a good one, that when it starts snowing in Vermont before it starts snowing in New York City, you got a bit of a problem. And you see where the Canadians got the snow more in northern Pennsylvania and southwestern New York. And this is by 8 o'clock Thursday evening. It's already raining in Long Island and just about all of New Jersey, whereas the NAM is it could be just a question of speed. The Canadian may just be a little bit faster. So let's go to the RGEM. God, I haven't been able to do this. I'm so out of practice with this stuff, Joe. It's ridiculous. By this time, usually we've already had several storms under our belt or more, and without having that, this is like forecasting snow in November when you haven't had much to look at for 6 months. But here's the low. Yeah, here's the low on the RGEM. And again, it shows, primary into northeastern Ohio with snow arriving in Vermont before it arrives in New York City, and it doesn't really show very much in terms of snow. It almost has it all starting off as rain. So perhaps the issue with the Canadian is the fact that it's got a fairly wrapped up low here when you look at the isobars, and that could be wrong if we look at the GFS. The GFS has got, it's kind of more east-west. More that high is holding in, so it allows for a little bit more cold air to get pinched in, and then of course it just goes away and it goes, up and out. And I know David Schwartz was asking for Thursday morning, so this is Thursday morning on the GFS radar, and it's long gone. This comes in. I mean, if you believe the GFS, it could be snowing here as early as Wednesday morning. And then it's got the dark blue snows in New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania during Wednesday afternoon. Then it goes over to rain by 7 o'clock at night, and by 1 a.m. it's just almost all done. It's still raining like crazy in in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, and then that goes out. But yeah, this thing is moving pretty quick.
William Jersey Shore on the chat board says, hey, this Rayo guy uses a snowblower for 3 inches of snow. Well, my criteria for using the snowblower, William Jersey Shore, is that if we get less than 3 inches, I'm out there with the shovel. However, I have a driveway. I know everybody has a driveway, but do you have a driveway that's 265 feet long? That's what I have. And I can assure you that when you have 3 inches of snow, and especially if you have 3 inches of heavy, wet snow, the kind of consistency like it's almost like white concrete, and you're going to try to shovel all that away with a shovel, forget it. And in that case, as was the case in 2007 when I had, according to my weather logbook, 3 inches of snow and sleet, heavy sleet I ain't going to be out there with the shovel. I'll use the blower because the blower makes it a heck of a lot easier. But less than 3 inches, I only get an inch or two. Yeah. I look
Right.
out, tell Renata, I said, it ain't worth getting the snowblower out. Let me get a little exercise. And I have done that. I've done the 265-foot driveway with like 2 inches, especially when it's a powdery snow. Then it's very easy. You know what else is very good, Joe? When you get a light, fluffy, powdery, low density snow,
Oh,
and even when you got
you get your blower, your
you get
leaf
your leaf
blower.
blower. Get the leaf blower out, and then that works wonderfully. That just blows everything all over, especially on my deck. My deck is wood and is a colder surface, so the snow tends to stick more rapidly there as opposed to the driveway. If I have a light snow, I don't get the snow, you get on the deck, you just get the blower and it's gone. So anyway,
Wasn't it wonderful for William from the Jersey Shore to make the kind of comment that only a disrespectful 24-year-old would make, so that you could have the opportunity to point out the advantages of using a leaf blower to remove snow? I mean, we should really thank him for that, Joe.
well, all of you who are in and Joe and I at one time, believe it or not,
We were 24 once.
just before the invention of fire, Joe and I were out there in our 20s, jumping up and down and rooting for snowstorms and everything else. But now, folks, after all of these years, we could just say, "The heck with it." Let it not snow anymore. We could deal with that. And I see you have the 10 millibar map up on the screen here, showing the position of the polar vortex for.
Yes, and yeah, there is a big warming event that's occurring, and various runs split the vortex in two, and other runs don't. But it does seem to be showing a somewhat weaker polar vortex developing. However, I am not seeing, at least so far, when I was looking at some of the climate models and all the rest of it. Um, I don't know, Joe. I don't know if I honestly don't know what this means in terms of what the overall pattern. What does this look up there translate to the look downstairs? Because
And Dr. Judah Cohen doesn't seem to understand it either. He's talking. He puts out very long technical discussions, but in the end, it's full of, like they said, full of words and music. Well, this is full of words and vorticity statements or whatever, and signifies nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
I don't understand
Look,
what you're talking about.
I don't know what that look is going to mean. Does it couple? Does it couple down to the atmosphere? Again, that could all happen, and it could create it could create another non-winter pattern across North America. We don't know. The block could be if there's if you want to make the other case that the weak polar vortex might allow for some blocking, well, I don't see any signs of it showing up so far. I know sometimes it could take a week or 2 weeks and what goes on upstairs to translate to something downstairs, and so we're talking maybe from mid-February on. Maybe it signals the fact that there could be it could be pretty bullish for the second half of February and for March. I'm shrugging my shoulders here. I don't know. And the thing is, back in the year we had the four nor'easters, I always forget. It was at 2018 or 2019.
I think it was 18.
All right, so we saw that split coming, which took place in the middle of February, and it took 2 weeks, and then the pattern really went crazy with those four nor'easters that started at the very beginning of March, and the last one was almost to the end of March. In fact, Islip got 20 inches from the snow on March 25th, I think it was the last date on that. But this is happening a bit sooner. So I don't know if what that year it coupled down and it was disruptive and everything set up the way it did. Then we had it happen in 2020, and The polar vortex, as I remember, split in two at the end of January, and it never coupled down to the bottom of the atmosphere. It never disrupted the low levels of the atmosphere, the mid levels of the atmosphere. Uh, the stuff that was going on with the Madden-Julian oscillation. Oh, it's in phase 8, the 8, 1, and 2. This is going to be great. Well, guess what? It never coupled with the pattern across the rest of the Pacific. So you could throw all this stuff and get excited about it. At the end of the day, if it doesn't hook up, you're stuck with what you got. And what you got now is something that looks more typical of a La Nina pattern than anything else after we've, lost the fire hose.
Well, the one thing I think with a certain amount of certainty is that in years where we don't have very much snow in the tri-state area, always, at least over the last 30 or 40 years, always the following year comes back big time. The year that we had less than 5 inches at Central Park, the following year, I think we had like 35 inches. So for what it's worth, if we don't get much this year, usually the next year or the next winter, which would be the winter of 2023, 2024, would turn out to be something that you would like. So maybe that's what will happen this year. But then again, we might see a backloaded winter, and we might get something when we get into late February or March. What else can I say? We shall see.
Shall see. All right. So you know what? On that note, I think we can pretty much wrap up the show. Coming up we just clicked to 12 noon, which means it's lunchtime. And
yes,
I don't have any football to root for because I shut that. I switched after the first drive that Philadelphia had. When I saw the I think on the first play they had like a 40-yard pass or whatever it was. But after they scored, I started switching back and forth between the Giants and I forgot whatever it was. It wasn't really anything memorable. And then when I came back to the Giants and I knew it was going to be at least 7-0, and then it was at the end of the first quarter, I shut the game off. That was it. You could see how Philadelphia was just running the ball, running right over the Giants as if they weren't there. So I said, this is not going to change. This game is over.
When it got to 21-0, Renato and I just switched over here in New York. Even though it's a PBS station, Channel 13 in the tradition of NBC and Channel 4 back in the 60s, basically running Saturday night at the movies. And last night, Channel 13 here in New York, Joe, ran Some Like It Hot. And I hadn't seen that movie in a long, long time.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing in the whole movie was Renato turning to me and saying, "Isn't that the guy who played the lion in The Wizard of Oz?" And I said, "No, that's not Bert Lahr. That's Joe E. Brown, who was one of the supporting characters." But it was a funny movie. And when the movie was over and I switched over, I saw what the final score was. The Giants. I said, "Well, at least I had a chance to laugh at something tonight." But the Giant game was not one of those.
Yes. All right, folks. So I'm soloing tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, you're going to be solo for Monday and for Tuesday. And I just want to say to everybody who was on the chat, when I recognize a lot of names, I posted the announcement about my mom's passing, I think on Thursday night or early Friday morning. And Joe, on Facebook, I've received over 1,100 comments. And I mean, a lot of times when somebody passes and it's announced on Facebook, you get the usual, I'm so sorry for your loss,
right,
or I send my condolences. I mean, many of these comments were like whole paragraphs expounding upon the death and expounding upon how, moms are so important in our lives. And I recognized a lot of people who are on the chat board right now writing those messages. I just want to express on behalf of my sister, Lisa, and Renata, I want to express my thanks to all of you. And I will, I'm going to get, when this is all, when the dust is settled, I'm going to go back. I'm not going to write a commentary or a thank you to everybody, but I will at least recognize your commentary with a little, heart-like. I will read all of them. I will respond to all of them in that manner. I just, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you very, very much for all of your kind expressions on the loss of my mom, who made it to 90. And the good Lord, all of us, I hope, will make it that long. And she went, Joe, as you and I have discussed off camera.
Right.
She went, I think, the way I think a lot of us want to go, in her own bed, no pain. She just went to bed, went to sleep, and is now up in the great beyond.
Exactly. I can't add to that. That's exactly correct. God bless.
Yeah.
God bless. All right, folks. We'll see you tomorrow night at. I'll see you tomorrow night at 7:35. Have a great rest of your afternoon and enjoy what's left of your weekend and have fun watching football for the later today. Bye. Bye now.
Okay. Bye bye, folks.